Okay, this one might be a little bit controversial, but well, fuck it. I make no apologies. I actually liked Dragon Age 2. That was my introduction to the Dragon Age series, and as such, Hawke is probably not my favorite character, but probably not my favorite, but he stands out in a way. He, well, actually, no, I'm not gonna get too far into that. He is a character that he's kind of like he is almost like most RPG protagonists in that he can be anyone you want him to be. The only difference is they kind of forced you to have some limitations on what you want him to be. This was still somewhat of a fantasy RPG, so they gave you options on what you want him to they wanted you want him to be. And one of these was, but they narrowed it down to where he was from Lotharing, which was a place you visit in Dragon Age Origins, and he was a survivor of the town after it was massacred. And after it was destroyed by Darkspawn. Like him and his family managed to get away, and that was mainly because either, well, actually I'll save that for next. But he just barely got away, and it wasn't without a few emotional baggage and scars. Um, and for the most part, it's still an RPG game that I think didn't deserve all the hate it got. It wasn't perfect. I will not deny that it had issues. It had very big issues, like the fact it didn't. Like one of the things about Origins that I liked was after I got on to finally playing it after two was you actually had the option of using a dagger and a sword as a rogue, and I think as a werewolf, but my memory on that's a little bit foggy. In two, this again, they tried to force you to narrow stuff down. So if you're a rogue, you can only use two daggers. If you're a mage, unlike in Origins where you could use a sword and magic, you would just have to put the sword away to use the magic. You could only use a staff and maybe attack people if they got real close. Or and also as a rogue, you also had the option to use a bow, but that was it. As a rogue, you could either be an archer or use knives. That was it. And as a warrior, you could either use a two-handed sword or a sword and a shield. Like they didn't give you more options; they limited your options a little bit more, which that is understandably why some people might have been pissed, or at least that's what I think. They it was a downgrade in a certain regard. But I still find Hawk's story kind of interesting in the basically in the context of what happens to them, how they progress through it, the options available to them, the stuff they are able to do. Like more could have been done, but hey, it is what it is, and I don't fault the people making it for it turning out the way it did. I just say, fuck it, we got what we got, and I'm perfectly fine with that because it was one of the more memorable games from when I was in high school. Backstory time. Hawke was born in a town called Lotharing, or a village, or he lived in it. And actually, the thing about his family was his parents were originally from the Free Marches, Kirkwall, but his family fled there because his dad fled the Circle and was, I think, an apostate, or was an apostate. It's hard for me to remember the exact specifics, but and they kind of lived under um, they lived under. Well, they kept a low profile basically. Like they were inundated with life in Lothering. They had social lives and all that. But life wasn't easy. I mean, regardless of the class he chose, he had a sister who was a mage, and she wasn't part of the circle. They lived in hiding and always fearing a day one day the Templars would come knocking at their door and looking for Bethany and maybe killing all of them for hiding her. If Hawke was a mage, he also had to worry about this. He and his he also had the unfortunate side of having an annoying brother who was kind of a prick. And life was relatively okay. They tried to make the best of it, or the best of what they could, until the death of the father, Malcolm. When he died, it's kind of sad. But after he died, the family I think was a little bit changed, but not a whole lot. Then either Carver or Hawke, if he's a warrior, both of them join the military. Carver does it looking for some kind of purpose in his life, and Hawke does it for reasons that I cannot be bothered to remember. But well, it's just not that I can't be bothered. It's just that I don't remember, and I'm going off of memory with this one. And they either Carver or both of them, if he's a warrior, fled back to Ostgard to warn the family. And when Carver got there, he was short of breath, and they just barely got away. And as they were fleeing, the town was destroyed by Darkspawn. They met Aveline and Wesley, a Templar. Unfortunately, Wesley had been exposed to the Darkspawn infection, or the taint. Not that kind of taint, get your head out of the gutter. And he was infected and he had to be put down. And before this, they were attacked by a troll. And if you were a mage, Bethany was killed. If you were a warrior or a rogue, Carver was killed. And that was how it went, basically. Now, they managed to. Not a troll, it was an ogre. They managed to kill the ogre and are saved by Flemeth, who, after they put down Wesley, helps them reach port and they sail for Kirkwall. And Flemeth only does this in exchange for them promising to do her a favor. And from there, they sail to Kirkwall. Well, okay, this is the part I had to restrict myself on, which is, and if I have to repeat this one more time in audio form because of interruption, I might go insane. It is a rags to riches story, basically. You see Hawke's rise from a refugee in Kirkwall to a figure of fame and renown known as the champion of Kirkwall. And that ride, I think, is probably the best part of the game for me in terms of story. Because he goes through so much in this period of years. He has to. Sometimes he helps the city guard with stuff. He helped get rid of the captain of the city guard. He funded an expedition into the deep roads, and if your brother's along, he will either die or be forced to go with some Grey Wardens if Anders is along. Um, you have a serial killer killing people. Like he's taking body parts to make a Frankenstein corpse to put it to revive his dead wife with. You have like at one point a cult tried to kidnap him, and because they wanted to use his blood to revive someone that had been in prison, and this happened because like long before his parents left Kirkwall and fled to Ferelden and settled in Lothering, there was this guy called Corypheus. He was I think, in prison, and they wanted to make sure it was even harder for him to get out, or they needed to imprison him. So a Grey Warden coerced Hawke's dear old dad Malcolm into doing it. He did this. Grey Warden did this by threatening his lover, who the Malcolm's eventual wife, who at the time was pregnant with Hawke, and they deal with it. Corypheus still comes back to be a thorn in the side later. Although, funny part, he's supposedly one of the magistrates who corrupted the Golden City, which causes the Darkspawn to come back and cause each blight to happen. Funny thing is, he claims it was already corrupted by the time he got there. Like I said in a previous video, this is the equivalent to me of saying, I didn't break this, it was broken when I got here. And another thing was he attended this event in, I believe, Orlais to deal with some noblemen who had plans that needed to be retrieved. And this was done by a member of the Kunari, not the Kunari, not even the religion, whatever the thing the Kunari subscribed to. One of their members recruited him. It was an elvish rogue named, I believe, Talus, played by Felicia Day, who I'm not the biggest fan of, to be perfectly honest. But hey, she did a good job in performance. Another thing was there were various dealings with a Dalish clan living outside of Kirkwall. I also forgot to mention how he gets into Kirkwall. his uncle who lives there basically wanted to get them in by greasing a few palms, and to do this, they get money from either working with a mercenary group or a group of smugglers. Now, that's up to you which one you want. I picked the smugglers because the lady representing them was kind of hot, and actually, no, that was it. She was kind of cute also, but there was also that, and like various stuff happens to Hawke and his associates. Also, over these years, during his first year there, he meets a good group of people who become his companions. One of them is Varric Tetris, a rogue with a repeating crossbow called Bianca, and probably my favorite character in the game. Like, he is the best friend you want anywhere. He's the fun friend. The friend who makes you laugh no matter what, basically. And if he has a hard time, you want to be there for him. And another one was Aveline, the lady who helped him escape from Ferelden and make it to Kirkwall. She eventually became a member of the city guard, and then after they deposed the captain of the guard, she replaced him. She got married. You help with that. Another thing is he met, I think one guy's name was Fenris. Didn't like him. You meet an elvish woman named Meryl, who is probably one of the sweetest characters in Dragon Age I've ever met. Um, you also meet Isabella, a fantasy pirate, who's probably like her. And it's hard to pick between her and Meryl sometimes. And then it culminates, well, not culminates, but it eventually leads to this event called the Kunari incident, where where they murdered the Viscount and tried to take over the city. Hawke defeats the Kunari leader, and for this, or either that or it's resolved another way. But if you either way, Hawke is recognized as the champion of Kirkwall. Finally, after that, things kind of spiral out of control, and he eventually has to lead the city before things get even worse. After the night, Commander Meredith does something stupid, and Anders does something very stupid. In personality, like I said, this thing kind of limits how much of an RPG it can be for you, but there's still some choices you can be. You have a dialogue wheel. I know can kind of be tedious sometimes, but it's similar to what they had in Mass Effect 2, 3, and 1, and Andromeda, but we don't want to talk about that one. It's like it's like telling that's like mentioning Tinder to a good girl. She's like, oh, you might as well burn up the Antichrist. Why'd you bring that up? I'm sorry, Becky. Punish me with your lips. To paraphrase a joke by It's a Gundam. But anyway, he has this dialogue well, and for the most part, you have three personality type options. You can be an altruistic, noble person, a sarcastic guy, or a joker type of person, which is the one I usually picked because I kind of like sarcasm and wit and all that. Or you can be very ruthless. Those are your options. You have also these options when deciding certain things, but I think the tone kind of depends on the personality type you've been doing up to that point. And yeah, that's about all I can say about personality. Like, again, it depends on what your preference is. I always played as a sarcastic guy whose heart was in the right place. And I can't remember if that carried over into Inquisition well or not. Like, I kind of liked how they used Hawke in Inquisition, but I kind of wish there was more of him in it. Powers, abilities, and skills. Like, I should just say skills and abilities. Again, this depends very much on the class you choose. Um, as a mage, you have access to various forms of magic. I believe the canon version of Hawke is a mage, and also that canon version of Hawke dabbled in blood magic, which is a big no-no in the Dragon Age world, at least to the Chantry. Some people who do this, they don't meet nice ends, I'll tell you that. But yeah, if you have healing magic, fire magic, I think I prefer the arcane magic because there was this one spell where you could have a person be grabbed and he would just be ripped apart. You saw this in the trailer where two magical gauntlet hands came out from inferno portals and just grabbed the Canary leader on one side and grabbed him on the other, then ripped him in half. This is some. I think something like this actually does happen in the game. It just doesn't look as cool. And as a rogue, you're a good arch. You're very skilled in archery, or you're very deadly with a pair of daggers. And as a warrior, your swordsmanship is pretty high par, basically. Like it's very good, and you have all these basic skills depending on your preference, on which class and what style and what perks you want. Also, as a rogue, I think you can throw bombs at people. Hawke's place in the world of Dragon Age is kind of similar to a lot of characters in Dragon Age, actually, in that he is very renowned. He becomes this figure of renown and fame who has both that can sometimes also be considered infamous. People know what he did. Even though it depends on your actions in the games, he's someone who people know. When you say the name Hawke or Champion of Kirkwall, they think of Hawke. Like he has come into his own into having a place that the world knows and knows not to. Well, they probably know he's someone not to mess with. This is something I kind of like about Dragon Age and certain RPGs like Mass Effect is both the protagonists and the various character companions they have also have their own kind of place either in the universe they inhabit or the world. And this is true of both. Oh, I can't remember if I already said this, but this is true of both protagonists and their companions. I mean, I said this about Morgan also that she has achieved some renown, and similar to Hawke, she came from a very lowly place but became something more than what anyone expected. Hawke did this, and this is true of a lot of characters in Dragon Age. Um, of Hawke, the Warden, Morrigan, Liliana. Although Liliana doesn't probably have it as much because she's more of a spy master. But Isabella to some extent, Varric could, but I think he prefers to keep a low profile. He's mostly known for writing, and some other ones I would say Zevras, but the only thing I think he's done is he's messed with the crows since his adventures with the Warden. Um, Aveline to some extent. The Inquisitor, this definitely counts for because he became the leader of the Second Inquisition Order. And just, yeah, they all achieve their own place in the world with some fame. And it's kind of interesting to see how they get there. Which is kind of a certain thing I like about the Dragon Age stories is not only see an origin for all of them, the build up, but you also see the end result, basically, is what I'm saying at. And yeah, Hawke definitely becomes this figure that the world knows, and he'll definitely be remembered in the history books. Is all I can really say about his place in the world. These are some things that I never thought of at the time in playing the game. In fact, these are things I would have never thought to consider. But looking back on them, some appeals that I find with Hawke is, well, one, it's a very rags to riches story with him in Dragon Age 2. It's almost kind of American. Like he started out as a refugee. He had to start from scratch with nothing after his home was destroyed, and nothing but a hovel to live in the lower class. Then he worked his way up and did more than good. He did big, and he never went home. And that's kind of similar to something. The idea of an immigrant in the United States is maybe if you come to America and things go right and you play your cards right, you will have more money than you ever imagined you would have in your wildest dreams or wet dream. You'd have so much money that if the past you saw the end result of what you would have, he'd probably check to make sure, or they would probably make sure they didn't just have a stroke and they weren't imagining things. Another thing is It's kind of like, well, some people like to say stuff that's better than The Last Jedi. I say this actually does something that The Last Jedi tried, but only better in that it tried to work this idea of anyone, you don't have to come from a special family to do great things. Anyone can do great things on their own eventually. Hawke kind of did, is a better example of that, in that he, well, not only did he come from nothing, basically, he had more restrictions against him. Like, especially as a, if you were a mage, like you had to worry about the chantry finding out about you. You had to worry about the Templars finding. You had to worry about being made tranquil. You had to worry about your family. He lost his mother to a serial killer. Like he had lots of shit to deal with, and he wasn't whiny about it. Well, I don't remember him being whiny about it. And yeah, he. Another thing was he could be who you want him to be. He could the love of his life could be whoever you chose. And he kind of, well, not kind of, but yeah, that basically is it. Is you have someone who struggled through life and had all these problems, or had trouble with basically the system that they were in, and they did good, and he worked his ass off to get there. Like it wasn't easy. There were many. There were a couple setbacks, a couple of problems in the way, moments of where it kind of seemed like life was trying to tear you down a peg or two. And well, actually, no, yeah, that was about it for me with him. Um, Actually, there is another appeal. He did touch on like I'm not a fan of social justice, but this thing does touch on themes of social issues like I guess with class and maybe stigmatization and what's the other one? And sort of discrimination with the mages in the city because that is a big plot element in that mages are oppressed. I mean, the mages don't have it the best everywhere in the world, but in Kirkwall they really seem to have the screws put to them. So that is something that is made an issue in the game and a theme and part of the narrative. So there was also that. And back then they did it without having to preach to me. I could actually enjoy what I was seeing, and yeah, it was fun. That was the main thing. It was a fun game. It sort of touched on social issues, in my opinion, but it didn't preach to you, and it didn't try to beat you over the head with them. But hey, that's just me and what I saw of it. If I had to compare him to someone, I would compare him to Revan almost, but no, not even close. Like the plot twist was too good with Revan. With Hawke, there's no plot twist basically. Just some shocking moments for a first-time player who didn't read any spoilers. If I could compare him to anyone, though, it would be two other characters in his world, which are the Warden and the Inquisitor. Whereas they both rose up to something greater than they started out as. More so, the Warden, the Inquisitor, it was kind of. Well, actually, no, he did kind of work his way up to become the leader. As did the Warden. He just went out. He went from being a new recruit to the leader of the Grey Wardens, depending on the choices you made in the game. Actually, no, I think either way he became the leader of the Grey Wardens, at least in Ferelden. So yeah, there's that. Like I said before, the protagonists and their companions in these games, some of them get built up to where they become important figures of the world. Hawke is one of them. Maybe like he's not a leader of something, but he is an important figure. Takeaways. With Hawke, the gradual build-up and power and standing within Kirkwall, that was something I liked. He didn't start out all powerful and having everything. It worked up to that. It worked up to him gaining it and to becoming, well, yeah, just someone who was important. He didn't start out important. He earned his importance, and it wasn't given to him on a silver platter. He actually had to work for it. Um, this is also something I think if you're going to do a sequel to something and have it involve new characters, consider giving them some connection to the previous story in terms of events. Like the sequel trilogy for Star Wars, the characters felt like they had no connection to past events, and they were just put in shoehorned in there. Oh, and then when they did give him a connection, they half-assed it. With Hawke, it was kind of like it felt kind of natural to me. Like, okay, it's not about the warden; it's about this guy who was affected by the events of Dragon Age origins, and it's also possible to do that in a sequel, but make a character his own. Maybe have less restrictions in an RPG. Also, is all I'm saying. And it's possible to make social commentary in a story without being an insufferable prick. Again, they touched on this sort of with the mages in Kirkwall at various points in the story, and it didn't feel like they were beating me over the head with it. Not completely, anyway. And those are the main takeaways I got from this. I know it's not a lot, but then again, I'm not very good with being articulate. So, yeah, make it that way. If you can think of other points that people could learn from this game, let me know in the comments. If you're a fan of the game or the character of Hawke, what do you like about him? What did you like about the game? If you didn't like the game, what did you not like about the game? I actually would like to hear reasons why people didn't like it other than it sucked. I mean, I get why people didn't like it to some extent, but at the same time, I would like some pointers on why it sucked. But anyway, with that out of the way, I'll be calling it a day here, or at least calling it with this video. Have a nice day, and remember the game was rigged from the start.